When John adopted Bella, a stray female dog, he never expected anything extraordinary. She was loving, loyal, and soon became an inseparable part of his family. But one stormy night, Bella gave birth, and what John saw left him frozen in shock. Among the tiny puppies lay something impossible, a human baby. At first, John thought it was a trick of the dim light. But as he stared, realization sank in. This wasn't just some illusion. The baby was real. Confusion, fear, and disbelief overwhelmed him. How was this even possible? Where had the baby come from? As he struggled to comprehend the situation, dark secrets began to unfold, secrets that would change his life forever. John's house, night. The wind howls through the trees, rattling the windows of John's small countryside home. Inside, the dim glow of a lantern flickers, casting long shadows across the walls. John, mid-40s, rugged but kind-hearted, kneels beside his beloved dog Bella, who is panting heavily on a soft blanket in the corner of the living room. Her swollen belly moves with each contraction.
John.
Easy, girl. Just a little more. You're doing great. Bella lets out a low whimper, her body tensing as she begins pushing. John's hands tremble slightly, but he stays calm. He has helped deliver puppies before, but tonight feels different. An uneasy feeling lingers in the air. One by one, small, wet pups enter the world, their tiny bodies wriggling as Bella instinctively begins licking them clean. John exhales, relieved. He counts them 1, 2, 3, 4. And then, the room falls silent. Bella's body stiffens as she pushes one final time. John leans in, expecting another pup. But when he sees what emerges, his breath catches in his throat. A newborn human baby lies among the puppies. John stares, unable to move. His mind refuses to comprehend what he is witnessing. The baby, slick with fluid, lets out a weak cry, its tiny fingers twitching. Bella, exhausted but alert, gently nuzzles the infant as if it were one of her own.
John.
Oh my God! His voice is barely above a whisper. He swallows hard, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. He carefully reaches out, his hands shaking, and lifts the infant from the blanket. The baby's skin is warm, its little chest rising and falling with shallow breaths.
John.
How is this possible? Bella watches him, her deep brown eyes filled with something almost knowing. John looks down at the child, still struggling to make sense of what just happened. This isn't a dream. This isn't a hallucination. This is real. The weight of the moment crashes down on him. He needs answers.
Fast.
John pulls out his phone, quickly dialing a number. His closest friend, Dr. Lewis, a local veterinarian, is the only person he can trust with something this unimaginable. John's house. Later that night. A loud knock at the door startles John. He rushes over, still holding the baby carefully in his arms. He opens the door to reveal Dr. Lewis, a graying man in his early 50s, dressed in a heavy coat and looking both groggy and concerned. Dr. Lewis. John, it's nearly 2 in the morning. What's going on? John doesn't speak. He simply steps aside, allowing Lewis to see the small infant wrapped in a towel against his chest. Lewis freezes, his expression shifting from irritation to sheer disbelief. Dr. Lewis.
What?
John, what is that?
John.
You tell me. Lewis steps forward cautiously, his hands unsteady as he lifts the edge of the towel. The baby lets out another weak cry, its tiny fingers grasping at the air. Lewis shakes his head in shock. Dr. Lewis. This can't be. This is impossible. John exchanges a glance with Bella, who remains curled up beside her litter, her ears twitching as if she understands their conversation.
John.
Bella gave birth to him. I saw it happen with my own eyes. Lewis stares at him, his mind racing for a rational explanation. He sets his bag down and immediately pulls out his stethoscope, pressing it against the baby's chest. The heartbeat is steady, normal, human. Dr. Lewis. John, this baby is perfectly healthy. But there's no way a dog could. He trails off, unable to finish the sentence. Instead, he turns to Bella, studying her closely. The pups huddle against her side, feeding, completely unaware of the anomaly in their midst. Dr. Lewis. We need to run tests. I need to know what's going on inside Bella. John looks down at the baby, who now seems calmer, nestled against his chest. His protective instincts kick in. John. No hospitals. No government labs. No one else can know about this. Lewis hesitates, then nods, understanding John's fear. Something like this would attract attention, the wrong kind of attention. Dr. Lewis. All right. But we need answers, John. And fast. John takes a deep breath, staring at the small child in his arms, feeling the weight of the impossible situation pressing down on him. Outside, the wind howls, carrying with it a sense that this is only the beginning. The storm outside continues to rage, rain hammering against the windows as John paces back and forth. His mind races as he cradles the newborn baby, wrapped tightly in a towel. Bella rests on her side, exhausted, her puppies nestled against her for warmth. The baby, however, is silent, its tiny chest rising and falling with each soft breath. A loud knock at the door startles John. He hurries across the room, still gripping the child protectively. He hesitates for a second before opening the door. Dr. Lewis, mid-50s, slightly disheveled from being dragged out of bed, steps inside, shaking rain from his jacket. Dr. Lewis. John, this better be important. You sounded. His voice falters as his gaze lands on the towel-wrapped infant in John's arms. His expression shifts from irritation to utter bewilderment. Dr. Lewis. What is that? John. I don't know, Lewis. Bella gave birth to this. It doesn't make sense. Dr. Lewis steps forward cautiously, rubbing his eyes as if trying to ensure he's seeing correctly. He slowly extends a hand and pulls back part of the towel, revealing the delicate features of the infant. His breath catches. Dr. Lewis. This isn't possible. John. You think I don't know that? I was here. I saw it happen. Dr. Lewis stares at John, his mind visibly working through possible explanations. He kneels next to Bella, carefully examining the puppies, then looking back at the baby. He places his hand gently on the child's forehead. Warm. Healthy. Dr. Lewis. This isn't a deformity. It's not a trick of genetics. John, if this is real. John. It is real. Dr. Lewis exhales sharply, standing up and stepping away, running a hand through his graying hair. Dr. Lewis. We need to run tests. DNA, genetic sequencing, something to explain this. John. I don't want the government involved, Lewis. Dr. Lewis narrows his eyes. Dr. Lewis. John, do you realize what this means? If anyone finds out, they'll take this child. Study it. Maybe worse. John's grip on the baby tightens. The thought of handing over the infant to cold, clinical scientists fills him with dread. John. That's exactly why no one can know. Not yet. Dr. Lewis sighs, clearly conflicted, but eventually nods. He reaches into his bag, pulling out his medical equipment. Dr. Lewis. Fine. Let's start simple. We need to make sure it's even human. John watches as Dr. Lewis carefully presses his stethoscope to the child's chest. He listens, his brows furrowing. Dr. Lewis. Heartbeat is normal. Lungs sound clear. Reflexes are typical of a newborn. John. So, it's human? Dr. Lewis shakes his head, unsure. Dr. Lewis. I don't know yet. Physically, yes. But biologically, we need more answers. As Dr. Lewis continues his examination, Bella shifts slightly, watching the baby closely. There's an unusual intelligence in her eyes, almost as if she understands the gravity of the situation. Dr. Lewis sighs heavily and pulls out a syringe. Dr. Lewis. I need a small blood sample. John hesitates, reluctant to let anything invasive happen. But eventually, he nods. Dr. Lewis carefully pricks the baby's heel, drawing a few drops of blood. The infant stirs but doesn't cry. He examines the blood under a portable magnifier, his face unreadable. Dr. Lewis. I need to analyze this properly, but something already seems different. John. Different how? Dr. Lewis shakes his head. Dr. Lewis. I need to run tests. But John, I have to be honest. This defies science. John swallows hard, his grip on the child protective, uncertain of what the future holds. He looks down at Bella, who lets out a soft whimper, her tail barely wagging.
John.
I don't care about science, Lewis. I just want to keep this child safe. Dr. Lewis nods, though his expression remains deeply troubled. Dr. Lewis. Then we need to move fast. Before someone else finds out. Thunder rumbles in the distance as John realizes the weight of those words. This isn't just a mystery anymore, it's a race against time. Abandoned research facility, night. John and Dr. Lewis rush through the overgrown path leading away from the decayed facility. The baby, now nestled against John's chest, lets out a soft whimper. The rain continues to pour, drenching them as they hurry toward the car parked on the dirt road.
John.
We have to leave. Whatever that thing was, it knew the baby. Dr. Lewis. Or it was protecting him. There's more to this than we understand, John. They reach the car, and John quickly opens the door, securing the baby in a makeshift seat of blankets. Dr. Lewis slides into the passenger seat, shoving the recovered research files into a duffel bag. The documents are damp, edges curling, but the information within them is invaluable. Int. John's car. Continuous. John starts the engine, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. His heart pounds as he glances at the facility in the rearview mirror. The silhouette of the creature lingers in the distance, just beyond the tree line.
John.
It's watching us. Dr. Lewis turns to look, his face pale. The figure remains motionless, its glowing eyes peering from the shadows. Then, just as the headlights sweep over the area, it vanishes. Dr. Lewis. Drive. John doesn't hesitate. The tires kick up mud as the car speeds down the road, leaving the abandoned lab and its secrets behind. Int. John's house. Night. The storm follows them home. Wind rattles the windows, thunder echoing in the distance. John carries the baby inside carefully, drying him off with a warm towel. Bella, still weak from labor, lifts her head and lets out a soft whine.
John.
I know, girl. We're home. You're safe. He kneels beside her, running a hand through her fur. Bella's eyes shift toward the baby, her tail thumping weakly. There's a connection, unspoken but powerful, between her and the child she brought into the world. Dr. Lewis removes his soaked coat, placing the research papers on the dining table. He pulls out his phone and dials a number, but then hesitates before pressing call.
John.
Who are you calling? Dr. Lewis. We need help, John. This is bigger than us.
John. No.
No one else can know. Dr. Lewis exhales heavily, setting his phone down. He pinches the bridge of his nose, deep in thought. Dr. Lewis. You don't understand. If what we found is real, that means the government, private labs, someone is still looking for this project. If they find out that Bella carried a successful hybrid, they'll come after him. John looks down at the baby, now sleeping peacefully in his arms. The thought of losing him is unbearable.
John.
Then we make sure no one finds him. EXT, remote cabin, night. Days later, John and Dr. Lewis arrive at an isolated cabin deep in the woods. The place is old but sturdy, a safe haven away from prying eyes. They unload supplies, food, medical gear, and the precious research files that hold the answers they need. Dr. Lewis sets up a makeshift lab inside. He's already running tests, analyzing the baby's DNA against Bella's. Every result leaves him more astonished. Dr. Lewis. John, look at this. The baby's DNA. It's human. But there's something different. Some kind of genetic anomaly.
John.
What kind of anomaly? Dr. Lewis. Not a defect. An enhancement. It's as if Bella's body didn't just carry the child, it changed something inside him. His cells are adapting faster than normal. John processes this, staring at the infant. The baby stirs, his tiny fingers curling as if sensing the weight of their conversation.
John.
So what does that mean? Dr. Lewis hesitates. Dr. Lewis. It means whoever started this experiment, they were trying to create something more than just a human. A long silence fills the room. Outside, the trees sway in the wind, casting restless shadows against the window. Then, a sound. A rustling from outside. John grabs his rifle, motioning for Dr. Lewis to stay quiet. He moves to the window, peering into the darkness. A pair of glowing eyes stare back at him from the edge of the woods.
John.
It's here. Dr. Lewis stiffens. Dr. Lewis, do you think it followed us? The baby lets out a soft whimper, and the creature outside shifts slightly, almost as if responding to the sound. John tightens his grip on the rifle, but something stops him. The creature doesn't attack. It doesn't move closer. It just waits.
John.
It's not here to hurt us. Dr. Lewis exhales slowly. Dr. Lewis. Then why is it here? John glances down at the baby, then back at the creature. The answer is clear. A thick fog blankets the forest surrounding the small, isolated cabin. The moon peeks through gaps in the clouds, casting eerie silver beams across the trees. Inside the cabin, John cradles the baby in his arms, rocking him gently. The infant's tiny fingers curl around his thumb, its warmth a stark contrast to the chilling reality they face. Dr. Lewis sits at a small wooden table, poring over the research documents they retrieved from the abandoned facility. He adjusts his glasses, eyes narrowing as he scans through the pages, his expression darkening. Dr. Lewis. John, these files, they prove everything. The experiment wasn't just about mixing genetics. They were trying to create something beyond human limitations.
John.
And they failed. Bella escaped. But somehow, she carried this child. Dr. Lewis exhales heavily, rubbing his temples. Dr. Lewis. The fact that the baby survived. It means their experiment was successful. But they won't stop here. If they find out he exists. A sharp rustling outside interrupts him. Both men freeze. John instinctively pulls the baby closer, his eyes darting toward the window. The dog, Bella, who had been resting by the fireplace, lifts her head, ears perked, growling low.
John.
It's here again. Dr. Lewis stands slowly, grabbing a flashlight. The tension in the air thickens. John gently lays the baby in a makeshift crib lined with soft blankets before reaching for the shotgun propped against the wall. EXT, cabin porch, night. John and Dr. Lewis step outside cautiously. The cold night air bites at their skin. The forest is unervingly silent, save for the whispering wind through the trees.
John.
Whispering. It knows we're here. Dr. Lewis clicks on the flashlight, sweeping the beam across the tree-line. The thick mist curls around the trees like ghostly tendrils. Then, movement. A shadow shifts between the trees. A pair of glowing eyes pierce through the darkness.
John.
There it is. The figure doesn't lunge. It doesn't attack. It simply watches, studying them. Dr. Lewis. It's not behaving like a predator. It's waiting for something. John tightens his grip on the shotgun. His instincts scream at him to fire, to end whatever nightmare has been stalking them. But deep inside, another feeling stirs, hesitation.
John.
What if it's not here to hurt us? Dr. Lewis doesn't respond. The creature takes a step closer, its form becoming clearer in the moonlight. Its movements are unnatural, but not hostile. Its eyes flicker toward the cabin, toward the baby. John's breath hitches.
John.
Oh my God! It's here for him. Int. Cabin, night. The baby stirs in his crib, cooing softly. Bella, still lying near the fire, watches the child closely. There's no fear in her eyes, only recognition. She lets out a soft whimper and stands, trotting toward the door. EXT, cabin porch, night. The creature takes another step forward, and for the first time, John sees it clearly. Its form is humanoid, but not entirely. Its skin is an unnatural shade, its limbs slightly elongated, its breathing slow and measured. Dr. Lewis grips John's arm. Dr. Lewis. This is what they were trying to create. John's heart pounds. The creature lifts a clawed hand, not in aggression, but as if reaching for something. For someone. The baby lets out a tiny cry from inside the cabin. The creature flinches at the sound, as though the wail stirs something deep within it. Then, suddenly, it turns and vanishes into the darkness. Silence follows. John and Dr. Lewis exchange a glance, their minds racing with unspoken thoughts.
John.
It didn't come to hurt us. It came to see him. Dr. Lewis exhales, nodding. Dr. Lewis. Then that means one thing, John. He looks toward the woods where the creature disappeared. Dr. Lewis. We're not the only ones protecting this child. John swallows, looking back toward the cabin, where the baby has now fallen into a peaceful sleep.